So the original sketch was actually drawn back in March, just as something I wanted to draw randomly. It wasn't initially for the Mermay challenge. And in fact, I had started recording this back in March as well, but I shelved it because I realised a little later on that it might not be the best one to start doing videos on, because it was a lot more complicated than I originally had thought, because it has a background, which I am not good at backgrounds. It is not my forte. I'm definitely a figure type person. I like drawing people and things, mostly people. So I realised that this could go very, very wrong. And I'd already spent, I think, an hour of recording originally back in March. So I shelved it for a while. And I had actually recorded another video, which I haven't finished editing yet. But then it got to May and I hadn't really had time in April to do anything. But suddenly I was able to do a lot of stuff in May. And there was the Mermay challenge. And it just felt like I should at least try and do this. And if it fails, it fails, and I won't put the video up, even though I'll have lost some hours. But I hadn't started doing YouTube videos just yet, so no one's gonna miss if I don't put a video up. So I did it, and I'm actually really happy with the results. There's definitely a few bits that I could have improved on, a few bits that I could have spent a bit more time on, but I spent 5.5 hours on this piece altogether. I struggled to get this down for a 15-minute video. So I think if I had spent any more time, I think I would have had to have either cut big bits out so you wouldn't have been able to see a lot of process. But yeah, I was so pleased with the outcome of this. It's quite funny because when I did the original sketch back in March, I quite liked it. I thought it was really nice. And then the more I looked at it, the more goofy I thought her face looked on the sketch. So I did her face a bit better in the digital work, which is one of the advantages of doing art digitally, is that you can zoom in, tweak bits a lot easier than you can, say, in a small sketchbook. Obviously, there are people who can do very, very minute detail in sketchbooks and things. I'm not one of those people. I really need things magnified for me to get down into the nitty-gritty. I should probably make a comment about the software I'm using to do this piece. I use Clip Studio Paint X almost exclusively. In fact, I can't think of the last time I used a different software. I have used Photoshop in the past, and I used to use that when Clip Studio was Manga Studio. I got Manga Studio 4, X4, and I used to use that with Photoshop. And then when Clip Studio Paint X came out, it had everything I needed, so I just started using that. And also I really love the stabilization tool in Clip Studio. I always found it really difficult making very smooth straight lines with Photoshop, which isn't a problem with Clip Studio. Also, I like the crisp lines that you can get with Clip Studio. I do have also Paint Tool Sci, and it's a nice software, but I still think Clip Studio is one of the best. And also Krita, if you're looking for free software, Krita is a bit like Clip Studio. I found that it has a lot of similarities to Clip Studio, and that's really nice as well. And I think it does have stabilization. I can't remember. I've used it briefly, but Clip Studio is my go-to for pretty much all my digital art. Now, one bit of the picture I actually do change is this front bit of hair, which I originally was alright with when I first did it, but then coming back to it and I looked at it and I hated it. It looked like she had a horn on her head. It wasn't even a straight horn. It wasn't like she was a unicorn. So I edited it. So I decided, nope, I can't look at this anymore. It's horrible. It looks out of place. And I'd also been practicing doing more realistic hair before I'd done this, so I thought, well, I might as well put this to practice. So yeah, that I do change, which you can see, and I'm happy with the result. I think it looks nice, and I actually think I probably should have gone back and done the rest of the hair, but again, I'd already spent 5.5 hours on this video, and I just could not bring myself to go and do, because there is a lot of hair on this mermaid. She has it going all the way down her back, all the way down her tail. And if I start trying to make it look really nice for the rest of it, I'm going to be here for quite a while. I think I spent a good 20 minutes just perfecting that front bit of hair. I can't quite remember, but it was a good chunk of video. And I am also really sorry about the garish pink and the garish green at this beginning part. I put really, really bright colours sort of on the background and on the front bit, just so I can see where I'm erasing and making sure that I don't leave big patches by accident, because sometimes if you are doing it on white, and especially if you're doing it with maybe a slightly lighter colour to colour in with, you can't see until you're starting to colour in with more detail, and suddenly you've got a big patch of white that isn't there to colour on top of. But you'll see I then go on to the mermaid and change the colour from green to a sort of sandy yellow, sort of thinking about what colours in the wild, what colours would a mermaid be? If she's living at the bottom of the sea in shallow waters, she'd probably want to be camouflaged, especially if she's got some canines, so she probably eats fish. She's probably a carnivore. And I decided instead of going for the usual fish-like tail, I would go for a more eel-like thing, which gave a nice curve to it and a nice form, which I liked a lot better than just a regular old mermaid's fishtail. And also it added something a little different. I know there are other people who have done eel-like mermaids and stuff, but this is my interpretation. And I decided to go with very violet eyes just for a bit of contrast on the face. I just wanted something, you've got very dull colours like sandy yellow and kind of a seaweedy type green for the hair. So I thought put something very, very vibrant just to add a bit of colour. Although later on it gets washed out with the rest of the colouring of the sea, basically. And the stripes. So the stripes I actually did using a pencil tool, which gave it a sort of grainy type look, which I quite liked. So I ended up putting a texture over the top of the mermaid's skin with the same pencil tool, just kind of giving it almost like a slightly scaly almost type look. Not quite, but it stopped her looking quite so smooth, I think. I'm not entirely sure it worked quite so well.
While I'm recording this audio, I just keep having the Little Mermaid Part of Your World singing through my head, so be thankful I haven't just started bursting out into song right now.
And then we go on to doing the background, which for the longest time of doing this, I was really stressing. I felt like it looked like my daughter, who is 6, it looked like, well, I think she could have done a better job to begin with. But I've realised that's how you have to start. You have to start very basic and work up. And so I did. I worked up. I went from very, very basic colours to adding a bit of texture to the sand, adding a bit of water reflection at the top. Not very well to begin with again, but it's all about practising and getting it in the end. And I had this idea to have stuff in the foreground just to add a bit of something at the front. So, a rock and a bit of coral. I think those are probably some of my least favourite bits of the background. I don't hate them entirely. I think I probably should have maybe blurred them a bit more or something. They didn't feel quite right where they were. I think they needed to have been blurred somewhat more. But I was also worried about blurring them too much, because I'm very scared of blurring stuff. And I added pebbles. I did do that I repeated a pattern of sort of circles, which I transformed and then put those down to add some small pebbles to the sand. I actually really like my seaweed. I had quite a bit of fun with the seaweed. I actually did a piece previously that gave me the idea of doing seaweed. It was a hippocampus picture which had a border of seaweed, which it looked really nice. It was really well done, if I do say so myself. So I thought, well, I'll do that kind of seaweed. It's not really based on any specific seaweed, it's more just sort of a general seaweed inspired plant, but I really like that. And especially the one in the background I actually quite like as well. It's blurry, but it adds a little bit something.
And the rocks, I'm not very good at rocks. I'm not very good at anything to do with backgrounds. Rocks are hard to draw and colour in. That's pretty much all I have to say on those. They turned out alright. They could have done better. I got rid of the one that was in the background because I just couldn't be bothered with any more rocks.
And then to do the shadows, I start off with a sort of blue, and I just cover the whole body where I think shadows are. It looks a bit weird to begin with, but I then put the multiplier onto it, or I change it into multiplier, and I add some shadowing to the ground as well, just a reflection of the light again from the surface. It's a very shallow bit of ocean that she's in, I think. There's still quite light down there where she is, but that's fine because she's camouflaged. And I have to say that this is one of my more common ways to do shadows, is to choose a colour and then change the layer to multiply. And I really like it. I learned it a few years ago just watching YouTubers, actually. I can't remember who I learned it from, but I think it does a really, really nice job of tying all the elements together, using the same sort of colour of shadowing. And then I've put an overlay onto the whole picture. It's a sort of blue and erased bits to add sort of the light shining through the water. And then I go on and do another layer with add glow this time, and I add the glow again from the water coming through and making sure that all of the other elements in the picture have the highlights on them. I'm quite pleased with how the highlights, I'm pleased with how a lot of this picture turned out, but the highlights are also quite nice. I think I did those quite well, especially on the sort of sea floor. It just adds a little something, that there are these little bits of shine and bits of shadow. And again, this is something I probably wouldn't have thought to do a few months ago if I had tried to do this piece. But I had sat and looked at so many pictures of the sea just to sort of pick out bits that I think I could do well. So yeah, so overall, I am really pleased with how this piece went. I would like to practice doing backgrounds a bit more, but I think that'll be something that I do very rarely for actual videos because it does take a long time to do. But for my first ever YouTube video, I am very, very happy. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you'd like to get more videos from me in the future, click subscribe. I hope to see you again. Bye for now.